All right.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Schilling from Secoya Health, bringing this week's Wednesday Wellness Minutes, and I have my amazing team member here, Ella. Great to see everyone this week. Funny little patch on the wall here, or the whiteboard. That's actually a tongue. If you read the description, this is part 2 of our 3-part series of the face, tongue, and nails. And today we're going to be talking about different aspects of what your tongue can tell you. We talked about last week about the correlation of different parts of the face and things like that. I'll expand a little bit upon that. It's good to listen to them both a couple of times. You're going to want to listen to these more than one time if you actually want to understand anything, because it's a lot of information, as you might have determined from last time. But basically, we're going to be writing on the tongue here. Of course, Ella has better penmanship than I, so I'd like you to be able to read it. We're going to have her write it rather than me. So, at any rate, some ideas as far as what the tongue goes, okay? So, the tongue is going to help you determine a system of what needs to be cleansed in the body, okay? As we talked about last week with the face, there's a lot of information from the face as far as the lines and where you're holding things and things like that. We can determine stress, like who's under stress and things like that. Like last week we talked about the crow's feet on the side of the eye and how sunken in the eye is. Those are 2 distinct signs of adrenal stress. There's another one with the tongue we'll talk about in a minute. We can determine which nutrients are necessary for the tongue to support or for the body that are showing up in the tongue. And think of all this stuff as like canary in the coal mine, okay? All right, let's see if this thing works. Oh, here we go, 5 times. There we go, awesome. There we go, good. Technical difficulties are great. So, as we mentioned, we can tell different things about the body. You can tell about digestive issues and things like that. We can determine the health of the tongue, whether it's dehydrated and things like that. We'll talk about that. But basically, your tongue is like turning over the cells every 3 days. It's pretty amazing what it does as far as your body's ability. I mean, if you think about the gut lining, like it's every 3 days as well. So pretty much all the internal surfaces, if you think about it from your mouth to your anus, it's really outside of your body. It's not until things are broken down, they pass across the wall, that they get in your body. As a result, your body needs to turn over those cells all the time because they're under, abrasive forces from, like, I think somebody came in today and they had I asked them, "Do you eat a tortilla chip or something?" Because they cut the inside of their mouth.
Oh, yeah.
I think you were in there for that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anyway, so what we're going to look for, any heavy lines along the tongue, any things called geographical tongue. Okay, we'll get into all this stuff. Different colors like black, white, green, things like that. They can indicate different imbalances in the body, shall we say. We'll talk about teeth marks and different shapes of the sides of the tongue and things like that. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, little red dots. And in my research for this project, it was basically thinking about, I know exactly one particular person who has little red dots on their tongue, and you're out there. One of your family members is probably listening. You'll get some information about that here today. Okay, so geographical tongue. Think about that as think about looking at the Earth from space, and there's a bunch of geographic, or even look at the first surface of the Mars, or no, let's go with the Moon. Moon's easier because you can see the different shapes, but the craters and all the different spots. So geographical tongue is going to be like all these different spots on the tongue. Okay, that's kind of a geographical tongue. Then you can talk about the color, right? Is it light white? Is it light pink? Is it bright red? Right? Does it look like you've been licking a lollipop, right?
Sure.
That kind of cherry thing.
Sure.
Sides of the tongue. So that's going to understand the shape and color of that as well, because shapes tell you one thing, where they are on the tongue is going to tell you another thing, and it's going to help you understand. Talk about gum health. So teeth are extensions of bone, and gum is like a mirror of your digestive system. So you can talk about need for digestive enzymes and stuff like that. There's all different stuff that the tongue can tell you. It's amazing what it can tell you from just looking at someone's tongue. So if you don't want to look in the mirror at your own, you should have someone stick their tongue out at you. In fact, turn to your family member right now and stick your tongue out, and you can look at each other and have fun with it. Okay. A fun little fact is if you have someone stick their tongue out at you and it starts wiggling back and forth, that's the correlation to the crow's feet on the side and the sunken in eye. That's the adrenal stress. Fun little fact. If you see somebody, even little, it shouldn't be a little kid. Little kids should not have adrenal stress. If their tongues are wagging, they're on the road for some serious challenges. But if yours sticks out and wiggles, or somebody else that might be an indication they have some adrenal stress. All right, so let's do some drawing here, okay? We have the kidney, bladder, and intestines on the back of the tongue, okay? So if you have someone stick their tongue way out, and you can see the back part, you can see, that's a good idea. She's a thinker. We got this totally Jimmy rigged up here, so our easel is in the big blue box in the back parking lot, because we're in the middle of building out half of our clinic, so you have to forgive us for that. Yeah, so kidney, bladder, and intestines. So depending on the color in the back and things like that, whether it's black, green, could be red, could be pale, things like that, you're going to look at the different types of things, okay? But if you see any irregularities in the back portion, I mean, this is probably not the back third, but think of the back third. I mean, this is generally speaking the back portion. You're not going to try to look down the throat or anything, but it's really if you stick your tongue out, the furthest portion back. So the kidney, bladder, and intestines, okay? So remember, when you think about the intestines from a face analysis, the upper lip is really strongly associated with the intestines. That's a really good indication, okay? So if we think about that, that's a great indication. And, you know, we talked about, someone came in and they said, I have a cold sore. It was actually a canker sore, but it was actually related to upper lip, you know, think about small intestine, lower lips, and large intestine. But generally speaking, look at the back of the tongue for any of those irregularities because it's going to give you an indication. In the middle, sort of the middle patch is the stomach and the spleen, okay? There you go. And remember, as a correlation, if you look back to the previous video, there's a line in the middle of the forehead. If somebody has a distinct singular line down the middle of their forehead, that's going to be a spleen line, okay? And we'll give you some ideas of some certain things that are necessary for supporting the body in a minute here. But generally speaking, the middle of the tongue is going to be your spleen and your stomach. To get down further, you got the lung and the heart, okay? So just think of like an arc here. Yeah, there you go. Good. That's awesome. See, this would have been horrendous had I done it. I'm very appreciative of her being willing to jump in front of the camera. So remember, if there's really high cheekbones, but they sink in behind, if it comes just sinks in there and drops off, that's a pretty distinct indication of the lung. And if you remember, the nose is going to be a correlating factor, like a big bulbous nose, big red nose, a person's nose getting bigger as they get older. Lung is grief, heart is sort of overwhelm. It could also be a broken heart or grieving, things like that. You get the stomach, could be anger and frustration, could be a red hot tongue in the middle. Spleen can be shame. What else? Intestines is lack of acceptance, anger and frustration as well. You get the bladder, which is your inability to assert yourself, mark your territory, set your boundaries, things like that. Kidney, oofta. Unexpected stresses, shocks and surprises, not being heard, respected, all kinds of fun stuff. As far as the neuroemotional context, because if there's an issue in the body and there's absence of an injury, you can guarantee that there's some type of neuroemotional stress. All right. Now, on the outside of the tongue, on both sides, is going to be your liver gallbladder. And why is that important? Well, I don't know too many people who don't have liver and gallbladder stress. Simple as that. So when you have a really swollen tongue, oftentimes it can sort of create a jagged edge, or even you can see the shapes of the teeth sometimes on the side of the tongue. Okay, that's an indication that they might have some liver and gallbladder congestion. Well, if you know, a lot of times, if there's irritation here, there's oftentimes going to be irritation back here, because these two dump into your intestines. First and foremost, your small intestine, as far as anatomically goes. Food goes in your mouth, down your esophagus, into your stomach, goes into your small intestine where the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. Ileum dumps into the cecum, down out the rectum, and then drops into the woods, because you're a bear in the woods, right? Why not? But you got two mirror images of the liver, gallbladder on each side. But look for swelling, look for imprints of teeth. Like when a person sticks their tongue out, look for their actual teeth shape to be in the side of their tongue, and or some type of jagged edge, if you will. A really long, straight line down the middle is going to oftentimes be stomach acid insufficiency, people with acid reflux, people taking proton pump inhibitors, or a lot of, Tums and all that other garbage that is going to limit their hydrochloric acid. Now, your hydrochloric acid is super important, not just for your stomach, but it sets the alkalinity in a lot of your body. That's why you can take something that's super acidic, like a bunch of grape juice, and shock your system into raising your alkalinity instead of it being more acid. It's opposite of what you might think it is. So you take acid beverage, if you will, to raise your alkalinity. It's the acid. It basically kicks your body into an acid buffering system where it brings a bunch of alkalizing material into the body. Now, that, if you're not prepared for it, that can be your muscle minerals or your bone minerals. So you want to be mindful. You don't want to be, if you're having trouble balancing your alkalinity, your acidity, don't say that too fast or too slow. It might sound funny. Your acidity, right? It's better pronunciation.
Good.
Yeah, better to say it slower. But understand that a long straight line down the middle is an indication of typically stomach or spleen. Okay, now how nerdy you want to get? So the stomach is right. Just getting nerdy down here. Yeah. The stomach and the spleen have an interconnected relationship where the spleen will absorb some material from the stomach. It's part of the lymphatic systems and things like that. So that's why those two are so intimately intertwined, if you will. If you see someone with a really purplish tongue, or it's like either pursed lips, purple puffers as they call them, or a purple tongue, that can be a hypoxia, which is probably what a lot of people out in the United States and around the world are experiencing right now because they're actually rebreathing their CO2, their carbon dioxide, in a mask, which is very poor choice, especially when they think about putting our kids back in school and saying, hey, we should definitely have them wear a mask all day long and stay 6 feet apart and not have lunch in the lunchroom and all this other stupidity I was hearing about today from one of the young people that comes into our clinic. Staggering. So I think there's going to be a homeschooling revolution, which is only going to feed certain services we provide here. Yeah. Okay. We talked about geographical tongues, films over tongue, look for cracks, look for coating. So white tongues, you can talk about babies with thrush, people that take a lot of medications with thrush. I took corticosteroids, inhaled corticosteroids for over 30 years. I know I've dealt with that in the past, having inhaled those corticosteroids. It just whacks your whole immune system, changes your microbiome, imbalances your mold and funguses and things like that. Definitely not helpful. So white tongues, just like basically lack of color, is going to be like an iron deficiency. So think of anemia. Women might suffer more from anemia than men because women menstruate every month of their life until they go into menopause. But we're talking a general coating on the tongue now, not just any specific area, but if it's in a specific area, then you can be even more inclined to understand what's going on in the body, okay? So there can be, maybe let's just say, maybe you have a white patch in the middle, as an example. Your spleen recycles your red blood cells, so if you have some issues there, you might have a white spot show up in the middle, as an example. We talked about the crack down the middle, that's about hydrochloric acid. You're also, if you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, you're not assimilating your proteins very well, which means you're not breaking it down. Assimilating means breaking it down and you absorbing it, okay? What else? Dry tongue, so if it's like, you look at this person's tongue, it's like there's a Sahara desert, like all these, just think of a picture of a desert where it's super dry during dry season and there's just like cracks in the dirt, okay? That's what a tongue can look like when a person is super dehydrated. So that's an indication, sort of, you typically get it in the middle here. Stomach acid is one of the most energy and nutrient-dependent substances in your body, which means you need a lot of energy and a lot of resources to create stomach acid, which is why some people are so stressed out and they have too little stomach acid as a frame of reference. Let's see, what else? No? Okay, let's move on. Talking about neuroemotional stresses. We talked about the grief. We talked about the indigestible anger and frustration that can affect the stomach. So it doesn't have to be necessarily stomach acid at first that's the issue. It can be the ongoing, unrelenting stress that won't go away. And as a result, that turns into your stomach acid being depleted, okay? Because stress will deplete your stomach acid really fast. So you might consider stomach acid for the stomach, digestive enzymes for the intestines. You could use herbs like hyssop and other things like that for the kidneys. Pollen, bee pollen for the bladder. Milk thistle and turmeric for the liver and gallbladder. Artichoke hearts, gallbladder is great for that. Vitamin D for the spleen. There's all kinds of fun stuff you could do to support the body. Red dots. So the red dots we talked about earlier, that's a B12 deficiency. As a general rule of thumb, there can be different nuances to it. Hi. Fan's working. So it could be different deficiencies as far as your B12. But B12 is used in a bunch of different things. For detoxification, for your protein assimilation, and think of methylation as a really important. Think of people talking about the MTHFR. That's a methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, which is an enzyme in your body used predominantly in the liver, which helps detoxify your body. Okay. Kids not getting enough protein because kids tend to be a carb. I call my daughter a carbitarian. Sophia, if you don't say, look, you can only eat this much carb and then protein, she's just like devouring potatoes and rice and couscous and whatever she can get her hands on. So, okay, you get this much of that and you got to have this. And then if you eat all that, then you can go back to that serving, right? You can give her another serving of starch or whatever, and then you just balance it back and forth. Because kids, if you don't instruct them, man, they're going to do whatever they want, right? Especially when they're strong-willed like the one I know. Yeah. So, what else? Anything else? That's pretty good. So, use this as the second prong of your analysis, shall we say, of the face and tongue. Look back at the previous episode, the previous segment to understand like how this all correlates with the face. We gave you some hints as far as how to do a differential diagnosis in terms of what's going on. Of course, you have the liver lines here. Really just understanding the different colorations. But there's all kinds of information you can glean from a person. Now, people don't typically walk around with their tongues hanging out, like Gene Simmons from Kiss, right? I think they say he cut his frenulum so he can hang it out farther, but I've seen pictures of his tongue and like super black back in this area. You just wonder what's going on the inside.
Yeah, right.
If it looks, here, Dr. Bob Rakowski once said, if something looks like it's bad on the outside, there's something bad on the inside, which is another way of saying the body breaks down on the inside before the outside in the absence of trauma, okay? Share with your friends and family if you feel like this has been beneficial. Send them both links. We'll send this out in an email as well in case you missed it or in case you want to send it and forward it on to your friends and family with a link to that. That'll be excellent. But we want to empower you to understand your body, empower you to understand what signs and symptoms it's showing you, and then help you understand like how to stay ahead of the game. Because the tongue can change in 3 days. Like it can literally change over 3 days. As soon as you change your diet or your lifestyle or de-stress or get rid of some type of conflict, you can change your tongue in a second, okay? Second being 3 days, of course.
Right.
Yeah. It's 1 second, 3 days.
Right.
Yeah. But tune in next week for part 3. We're going to be talking about the nail analysis and correlating the nail analysis with the tongue and with the face. So then you can do the trifecta. You can have a lot of external, because people are going to look at their toenails. I'll try to give you some insights about which meridians come out of which fingers, so you can then correlate that back through. There's just so much information you can tell from the outside of the body. Remember, before they had a diagnostic blood, urine, or saliva test thousands of years ago, when the Chinese were developing Chinese medicine 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, they didn't have any of that. So they had to look for the patterns, look for the nails, look for the tongue, look for the face, hair patterns, when you have hair, that is. All the good stuff. But anyway, tune in next week for the Wednesday Wellness Minutes. We'll be excited to bring that last segment for you. And then we're moving on to poo, okay, because everybody needs to know about their poo. All right? Yeah, everybody.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen the Snellen, I think it's the Snellen stool chart. Just type in stool chart in Google if you want to look up Google Images and get a preview. We'll be talking about that. I'll have Ella draw some poo on here.
Yeah.
Mr. Hanky, right? South Park, is that what that was? Anyway, but it's been fun having Ella here. I don't have to stand up here by myself.
Happy
and just
to be here.
Yeah, exactly. So tune in next week. We'll see you guys then. We'll sign off for now. All right.
Bye.
We're running. Bye.